Hello, this is Bob Samuels from Tech Connector. One of my favorite opportunities is to bring together some very sharp people and have some educational, entertaining discussions about interesting topics. And this one is a favorite on the AI side. I'm getting very into the AI and what it can do for us as a community. And the healthcare, health net, biotech is just an interesting area. I'm not an expert in that in any way, but I've got two favorite people that will help lead the discussions. So any rate, so I'll give you a little fun fact of me. I'm a fairly new grandfather and a pickleball aficionado. So those are my big interests these days besides AI. Any rate, Sean, if you can give a little introduction.
Sure. My name is Sean Markin, strategic marketer. I am helping grow a med tech startup from the marketing angle and also helping them with artificial intelligence and product development. I'm passionate about artificial intelligence, have been since honestly a little kid. I built a public school from scratch, and part of how we designed it and what the design was built around was the coming AI acceleration. And then just the last few years, it's just obviously taken off. In the last few months, it's taken off. Medicine is particularly near and dear to my heart. My dad is a therapist. So one of the first AI systems was Eliza. So that's obviously AI being there. And my mom was a nurse. And then even more personally, when my mom passed away, I just felt like if we had AI, that didn't have to be possible. That didn't have to happen. So had AI been able to accelerate healthcare, perhaps she'd still be with us. So that's my personal connection to it. Fun fact about me is that Midjourney designed Steve's outfit today. So I am very excited about that. I'm also pretty excited that we have artificial intelligence listening to us. If you notice the attendees, we have AI listening to us talk about AI. So this conversation is about to get very meta. So
Thanks, Sean. Steve?
Great. So Steve Bardieri, AI startup force multiplier. I know most of you via LinkedIn or through personal connections, or I've met you before. So I advise both early stage and growth stage startups to sharpen the business strategy, do smart tactical execution. And my focus for the last 5 years has been in AI and healthcare. So everything from digital therapeutics, mental health, brain care, wellness, precision nutrition. And the means to an end is using not only generative AI, but biological AI, emotion AI, augmented intelligence, which is the frame on this webinar here. So really looking forward to getting into the meat of the program here.
So I will start it off by thanking you, Steve. It's such an honor to be able to talk to you. Our conversations have been amazing over the last few weeks. So I'm really grateful for you. But I want to start it by asking, we see AI model performance radically accelerating. And we could talk about how that impacts literally every area of our lives and every area of healthcare, but maybe narrow it down for us so our listeners can sort of like get their head around it. What areas of healthcare do you see being the most impacted?
Right. So before I get there, let me just do a quick preamble on explaining augmented intelligence. And actually, for the record, I started talking about augmented intelligence 5 years ago at an IBM Watson event. That's when they thought they could cure cancer at MD Anderson along with PwC, but let's not go down that rat hole. So augmented intelligence, the simple definition is humans working with machines. So alluding to Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, efficiency should be delegated to machines, while effectiveness should be a human pursuit. And if you go back, another quote from one of the gurus, Doug Engelbart, And if you haven't seen the mother of all demos, you can look it up on YouTube. It was in 1968, and that's where Steve Jobs got his an idea, a decade later for Apple. He said at that time, or maybe I'm not sure at that time, maybe some years after, technology should not aim to replace humans rather than amplify human capabilities. So intelligence amplification is sort of like the analog to augmented intelligence. Okay. So to your question, Sean, and we have some poll questions as well. We'll let Bob do that. There was a recent survey by Bain and Company that queried in the next 12 months what are going to be the top use cases for generative AI. And there was like a list of 20. I'm not going to go through all 20. I'll give you like the top 3 or 4. The first one for the next 12 months was improved clinical documentation. Number 2 was structuring and analyzing patient data. And number 3 was optimizing workflows. Now, they also said, what about in the next 24 months? What bubbled up into the top 3, and this is a good one here, is diagnostic and treatment recommendations. So there was a recent press release about a Tel Aviv hospital is now using for ChatGPT to run a tailored search for each patient on a knowledge graph of over 30 million evidence-based medical insights. So what it's doing is really doing a triage tool, okay, that can really, get you locked in to what are the symptoms, what I need to be aware about. And I think that's a terrific use case.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go ahead and share the use case with everybody. They can use case poll.
Yeah.
That people answer while we keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So it would be good from this audience, rather than Bain and Company, to get your opinion on the use case. I gave you the diagnostic and treatment. We're going to talk more about it, but it'd be interesting to hear from you.
Excellent.
Yeah, so while they're doing it, I think for me, what's interesting is you have your large language models which are effectively based off of transformers and but then you have what you just talked about which is happening in Tel Aviv, which is, they're probably using some form of graph neural network. And so this integration of models is really, for me, where it gets exciting. But you think that the improved clinical documentation is going to be how's the poll going? Bob, do we have a consensus yet?
I'm gonna give it a little bit more time.
Okay, well, Bob,
Okay.
people are voting. I'd love to hear, Steve, what you think it's going to be. Improved clinical documentation is going to be the near term. What do you think is the impact of that for doctors and for hospitals? What do you think is the leverage point there?
The leverage point is clinicians and doctors, the amount of time they have to do with tedious tasks, right? In terms of updating the EMR, EHR. If they can automate, some of this is going to give them an extra, I've seen studies like an extra 2 hours a day for higher level work and patient engagement. So yes, I really think the low hanging fruit here, is structuring workflows, optimizing workflows, analyzing the patient data, making, so rather than just having glorified billing systems like EMRs are, you can actually have them to really be more of a clinician support tool, sort of like the triage, from the Tel Aviv hospitals.
Yeah, as someone, not to make this like a deeply personal thing, but I have very strong memories of my dad spending insane amounts of time, like literally speaking into one of those it started with a gigantic, back in the day when I was young, it was a gigantic recorder with tape that he would then send to someone to transcribe. And then it became one of those little things. And now we talk pretty frequently about like, can you get AI to sort of record and synthesize what you're talking about? You know, there's patient confidentiality in there, but I've always felt, and I want to get your opinion on this, that the cornerstone of all, this is maybe too bold of a statement, but let me just make it anyways, sort of like drop a bomb. The cornerstone of AI and health progress going forward will be electronic health records, will be the ability to have those universally available to systems, to train systems, to get smarter on systems, to close the loop between what's happening in research and then what's actually happening with the patient population and what's happening with the diagnosis and the treatment, and basically closing that loop so that you can say, here's exactly what happened. Is that crazy? Am I like completely off the rails there, or do you have some?
No, I think I mean, it's we need smarter EMRs, as you alluded to in our prep for this, Sean. So, and regarding that, I also want to make, I mean, it's all about, right, better diagnostic decision-making and treatment to improve outcomes and experiences, right? But I want to kind of put a wrapper around what are really the capabilities of LLMs, right? For LLMs, the who, what, where, when, and how, I think are pretty much, effective. Where it gets a little scary and tricky is the why, because LLMs, large language models, do not have common sense to generate meaning. They have no general understanding of what is true or false, right or wrong. And the biggest thing is that they lack explainability. So what you're seeing by the Tel Aviv in terms of bounding it with evidence-based reasoning, I'm going to cite a couple of other examples for companies that actually I'm an advisor to. This is how you can kind of get to get into the causal analysis and really combat the misleading, bias, faulty, or just plain false. And in healthcare, especially when there's clinical risk involved, you darn well better have that. So when, we didn't get to this other question, but we're going to get one of the other poll questions that you may want to put up, Bob, is even the experts like Sam Altman from OpenAI are starting to doubt that ChatGPT and other large language model solutions will ever go away. It's not fixable.
Okay, let's hold that thought for a second. Let me just share the poll results. And
okay.
I probably should have stayed the poll in multiple choices, letting people have multiple answers, because it's really more, it's pretty spread, right?
Yeah, it is.
All
but
of the
that's
above.
good, yeah,
That's very cool. So in case people can't see the poll results, improving clinical documentation got 17%, and it was the top. But then there was a three-way split for second place: structuring and analyzing patient data, optimizing workflow, clinical decision support tools, all came in at 13%.
Yeah, diagnostics is actually the top. It's not in order. It's in the order of the questions.
Oh, yeah, right. Diagnostic and treatment recommendations. Sorry, hadn't scrolled down. My bad.
Right.
Nice.
So diagnostics.
Nice. And that really does hold true. That's what, and I'm going to present another use case right on the heels of the Tel Aviv. I mean, because really, when you really look at it, you're really talking about being an automated physician assistant or nurse practitioner. I really think that that's really a tremendous use case. And with that said, I'll give you another example. Next to the Tel Aviv example as well. So, and it really ties to, mental health. Mental health is a huge crisis. In fact, there was a recent study by WHO, 1 in 2 people globally will experience a mental health disorder in their lifetime. So, I'm very keen on digital therapeutics And actually, when you're looking at the raise, the first half of the year, it was like over 6 billion and 244 deals. But of the 20,000 mental health apps, 90% are focused on mindfulness training rather than effectively treating the mental disorder. Now, the better ones are using gamification because that's, you can change behavior. And it's good that a recent initiative by the Biden administration pledges mental health care to get parity, in insurance coverage. And you've got a few players like Intermountain, Geisinger, and mHealth that are integrating behavioral health into primary care. But the problem with this is that, there's a lot of hidden links between mental disorders. And even if you look at some of the gurus with DSM-5, it was flawed from the beginning. So, few patients fit into neat little set of criteria. They have a mix of symptoms. So if you have one disorder, you're more likely to have another disorder. And there's got to be new methods. So the second example, and in all disclosure, I'm going to invite you to, Omniscient Neuroscience, OAT.com is their website. They use connectomics, which is a set of interactions in the brain with evidence-based root cause analysis. So you can actually get groundbreaking data image analysis for personalized brain care. And even players like Viz.ai don't have this at all. And they're, doing tremendously. So the current application that they have, it started with neurosurgery planning and recovery, and they're in 100 institutions. But this underlying tech will morph into Infinitome and a Gen AI app called ClearTome, which will address specific disorders by locking in through the connectome. You can actually say, well, listen, mental disorders are brain disorders, so you need to understand the how and why through the connectomics. And when you're getting into, and this is a personal thing for me, when you're getting into issues like chronic pain, right, and chronic stress, who are you going to go to treat this, right? And I'll give you a recent example. My wife has spinal stenosis, and she's had it for a number of years, but it's getting worse and it's giving her brain fog. So we went into a spine surgeon recently, and she had an upper back and lower back MRI. And the spine surgeon said, well, yeah, you've got some dings here and some, compression, but I don't really see enough to go in and do minimal invasive surgery. I asked this, can I ask a question? Sure. I said, do you think there's some impinging upon the vagus nerve that is giving her, brain fog through interruption of neurotransmitters? And he looked at me and said, I'm not a neurologist, but I can refer you to. And, it was just sort of like very frustrating but, so many folks are going through that.
I think it speaks to the potential of AI to be wildly integrative. And what I mean by that is you no longer have to have a doctor that doesn't have that. Your concept of augmented AI means any doctor has the power of 1,000 doctors behind them. One of the things, and again, a personal story, my mom, when she had cancer for a while, but she had this diagnosis where it started to sort of come back. And for 2 years, she sort of languished with these local doctors in the western suburbs of Chicago. And then she went to this wonderful clinic at Rush, which ironically, where my mom and my dad met and where they worked. And she went to this wonderful clinic, and the doctors walked in and they explained to my mom, look, this is how we work. We have 20 doctors, very good doctors, clearly. And we all put everyone's case, at the top, every day we put their case up in front of the group. These 20 doctors decide it. They then discuss this is what their treatment plan should be, or whatever the results are. So we basically get the benefit of 20 doctors.
Nice.
And as someone who's passionate about AI, I was like, well, okay, here's the thing. Now I get the benefit of 20 million doctors in the form of artificial intelligence. I get multiple models. I get large language models. I get graph neural networks. I get symbolic models. I get liquid neural network. You get all this cutting edge stuff connected from a variety of interacting fields. And I don't have to sort of like have 10 minutes to look at my patient's sort of record. I can look at new sensors will come around. And we talked about as one of the groups you meant, Taito Care, basically having this like almost real-time sort of sensor with you. You have all of that data integrated into some coherent picture that your physician or your general practitioner or your specialist can then leverage. And there's this consistent genius thread going through all of your work. And so we have a question here, and I think this is sort of on topic for where we're going is, Google just dropped MedPalm 2. So what are your thoughts about that? Because it's significantly better, and there's, it reached 86% accuracy with their own sort of benchmark of MedQA. Where do you think that's the right direction, but where do you think that goes?
Right, and this is part of their, partnering with Mayo Clinic to encode clinical knowledge. So there was a good article in Nature about very impressive capabilities, but the bar, as the audience knows, is very, very high. So the synopsis of the Nature article, and I'm just reading from that, is so attempts to assess the clinical knowledge typically rely on automated evaluations, and you're right, MPalm performs encouragingly, but remains inferior to clinicians. So, and they actually alluded to the human evaluations. It's really combinatorial. So it's really, reinforcing the importance of both the frameworks and the methods, but it's a step in the right direction for sure.
David Schneider just said in the MMLU, GPT-4 scored 86.4, whereas Palm scored 81.2. So that's interesting.
Yeah, thanks, David.
Given the delta between Palm 2, Palm 1, GPT-4, and GPT-3, 3.5, GPT-2 at 1. Anyone who's been following that progress has seen like astronomical progress. Where do you think, let's just add another number. Let's add 1 to that number. Where do you think Palm 3, GPT-5, Palm 4, GPT-6, where do you see that happening? Like we've talked about, diagnosis, but where are you excited?
Well, there was a recent, in fact, Andrew Nigg just posted on LinkedIn, this before the webinar here, that they just released a large language model with semantic search using Cohere. So it's all about, similar to the Tel Aviv and Omniscient, really getting evidence-based, capabilities into. So that's really, so they're talking about, embeddings to retrieve a relevant, collection of documents, rank them precisely, how it all ties together. So you kind of squeeze out more of that hallucination, problem that they have. And this going forward, and we talked about it, Sean, I really think you need to tease in elements of, symbolic. It isn't just going to be, large language models alone. It's going to be kind of combinatorial to address this.
So David thinks that and if I'm interpreting your comment correctly, David, you think as we increase in development, there'll be diminishing returns. I'm wondering if that is incorporating sort of new research that comes out. So if I have 1,000 research papers in medicine and biology and neuroscience happening all every single day, being able to integrate that in an intelligent way, you just look at archive for a day and you see it's like how, exponential growth, and and my passion for open science, hopefully that becomes a thing. Like the ability to integrate that novel science into diagnostics, into sort of like these things. And again, we talked about, I want to compliment Denise for complimenting me. Thank you, Denise. Love the ego boost. You know, you see something like the integration of health records being connected to that. And now all of a sudden, like you've got this, I personally see it being, you have this like hyper, you know, this ability to sort of hyper diagnose what's going on. Again, using your wife, it's sort of like, well, I'm taking in this information over here and this information in here. And you don't have to have this sort of like stilted conversation between doctors. You have this fluid conversation where doctors are augmented.
Right.
I think that's what you're talking about, correct?
Yes, exactly. And I made a recent post. I don't know how many folks are familiar with the provocative Apple 1987 Knowledge Navigator concept video. And my comment was, ChatGPT, other LMMs have a way to go to match the vision of Knowledge Navigator. I'll leave it at that.
To that end, we are seeing LLMs becoming increasingly open source. We're seeing them connect to other types of models, as you alluded to. You talked about symbolic AI, you talked about bio AI. Where do you think, in your experience, being basically a force multiplier for startups and for existing businesses, where do you see the green field for startups being based on this?
So it's really being kind of clever to kind of, to look at, let's talk about biological AI and synthetic bio, because this is a potential 3.6 trillion science changing life. Now, so synthetic bio is genetic engineering done at a more granular level, right? So there's a lot of use cases, but in the medical sector, it's, the best example, of course, is, COVID-19 vaccines with messenger RNA. So novel diagnostics, gene therapy, AI is creating highly effective antibodies, that humans can't even imagine. So I really think it's, they can be very effective. So, so really, it's, to answer your question, Sean, I really like the combination, of evidence-based, teasing in elements of synthetic bio with, with generative AI. And I think that's a greenfield opportunity for startups.
So you're talking about like the next generation of pharmaceuticals essentially being hyper tailored to individuals. Hyper tailored.
But yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, a great example is who you're going to go see for an autoimmune disease. Wow, it's a hard one, right? And there's some issues in the medical community. Why does very few MDs study nutrition or get more, grounding in nutrition? Why isn't the endocannabinoid system taught in medical school, right? This whole notion of homeostasis, right? And why, and that personally, and why I'm keen, getting more keen for my wife and others on naturopathic medicine that avoids drugs, and treats the whole person, right? Body, mind, and spirit, using nutrition, lifestyle, environment, genetics, right? So there's a lot to be said about that. And I think more and more, as primary care is getting under siege, and we're less and less, like the AMA forecasts a physician primary care shortage between 20 to 50,000 by 2034. So and I, one of the questions, I don't know if you put it up, Bob, is, will clinics, CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, will they start to be the place of preference from primary care? Conceivably, it could be the case.
Yeah. I mean, that's where people get their vaccinations oftentimes. So like, why not? I mean, I do think Denise asked an interesting question. how do you bridge the differences between human ability to provide experiences and the responses that can be correlated to the dynamic systems? Where, like, how do you see that? Because I think that sort of alludes to what you're talking about, is when you can distribute this care more widely, both personal, you can start taking care of yourself, let food be thy medicine type approach, and then with Taito, with you having your own sensors sort of around you, and then you have this distributed care. How do you sort of bridge that? How do you see that bridge being made?
Right. So I answer it the following, is that the innovation healthcare really needs is to help people manage their own health, because 80% of chronic diseases are impacted by healthy diets. And we can thank the food companies for sweetening the world, right? I mean, gut health affects mental health, you know? So not only digestion, immune, but your mood, right? And it's unfortunate. I get a little infuriated about the complacency of people that, pop Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro into their heads. If you're like an extreme case and you have no recourse, okay, maybe that's your only alternative, but you're going to have to suffer the debilitating side effects. So my point is, I really, in addition to, neuropathic, I'm a big believer in functional lifestyle medicine, right?
Yeah.
And if you can use food as a medicine or certain probiotics as precision nutrition, you can treat PSOS, type 2 diabetes, IBD, Crohn's, colitis. Better Meal AI, one of my other gigs, that's essentially what they do. And the way it works in a nutshell is that you take your blood chem panel test that most normal people get every year, you upload it to the AWS cloud, it does the sequences of biomarkers, and it matches them to the bioactives in foods, and you get a precision nutrition guidance through the app where you're improving the overall digestive health. So in a clinical study in India, 500,000 people, over half felt better. And then some of the real gotcha stats is 38% of PSOS patients saw their cyst size reduce, and 36% had a drop in HbA1c.
Wow.
So you don't need to take Ozempic.
Nice. I mean, I think so. That seems to signal to me another greenfield opportunity is this sort of opportunity to connect lifestyle and lifestyle advice to sort of your medical, whether it's medical records or recommendations of this is how you eat healthy, and this, let me track you being healthy, and let me actually provide you with, here's the benefits for that. We do have a question.
I agree with that. I think that's the perfect nexus, Sean. Go ahead on the question.
Interesting. So one of the questions is, and I think I skipped a question up here, so I apologize if I did. I'll go back and look, but this seems to me relevant. And I also have an answer on this, and I'm very curious about your answer. Because this is something that speaks to a lot of the sort of AI ethics work. How can AI be error-free in healthcare? What if a glitch and everything comes out to be diff? I'm not sure what that means, but to be problematic, I suspect.
Right. And that's really the issue, right? Is why it comes right back to what we already talked about, is you need, the why. It's the why, right? The evidence-based reasoning needs to be addressed in order to be able to get to, it's sort of like, back to the hallucinations, right? Do humans, ChatGPT has problems with that, right? But that's why there's specialists, right? The whole propensity of being a specialist is you should have less hallucination, you would think, right? It's axiomatic. But for a general practitioner, we didn't talk about that yet. I really think that that's one of the greenfield opportunities, one of the best use cases. And there's other startups like this Bionic Health, it isn't one of the big, Walmart, but they're using Chat GPT-4 and other ML models for preventative care. Hallelujah. So the initial aim is preventative care like chronic pain or a virus. Longer term, they want to extend into, into primary care because of the problem of losing primary doctors every day, and getting appointments is a pain in the ass, right? Through referrals.
Yeah. So Brad and I are going to become besties because I agree with Brad. I think we have this, I think we oftentimes have a bar for artificial intelligence that we don't apply to ourselves. Like, I don't know that I've ever done anything, including this podcast, 100% perfect. Although maybe Denise will agree with me, hopefully. But, if we can reduce the error, if we can get the error lower, or if we can still have even better results, but with the same amount of errors that you see from doctors, I think that's the right thing. It's sort of the Tesla thing. If we can have self-driving cars that are just as good, if not slightly better than humans, then that sort of, that's, and explainability for me is sort of like, I think about this research that was, so I'm passionate about explainability, maybe not for the reasons everybody else seems to be, but there was this research that was done out of University of Michigan, and they created this system called Bacteria AI. So they basically flipped the 2 letters at the end of bacteria, and they had these bacteria basically the system was robotic in the sense that it carried out its own experiments, it designed its own experiments, and then it sort of went through. And part of the benefit of it was that it could do these things fast. So it could do 1 million experiments in a year, basically was their pitch. And it started to predict like how fast these things would grow based on the nutrient bath and a whole bunch of other stuff, which is boring. I highly recommend not reading the press release, reading the research paper. So there's that. But what they did that I found, actually, they did a whole bunch of things interesting, because if you do back of the napkin calculation on how many experiments this thing can do, like within a year, if you put enough of these in the average size American warehouse, it could do something I calculate 3.6 trillion experiments, which is, if you do another back of the napkin calculation, more than all the experiments in biology ever done in the human history in 1 year. That's interesting. But the other part that's interesting is they use 2 AI systems. One was sort of like a fully connected network that basically learned and had all of the nuances that are associated with a fully connected network, and had the precision of that. And the next one they ran in parallel, which was a symbolic network, which seek to provide the best explanation for what the fully connected network was doing.
That's awesome. It really is. And that is a proof positive, Sean, of combinatorial, right?
That's right.
With generative AI.
And what they found,
by the
though,
way,
oh, sorry, one more thing. What they found was that when they tried to replicate the results with the symbolic, they were 70% accurate. When they tried to do the fully connected, it was 90% accurate. And so it goes to show that there's only so much that language or linguistics can capture in the thing. And it's sort of, and I think this speaks in some ways to the power of a general practitioner, maybe gives them a little bit of more runway if they're worried about losing their job, is that there's something about the nuance about being there, working with that patient, getting all of the data back from that patient, not just the sort of the numbers that they see on a report, but like actually sort of intuitively working with them. I think there's a huge power there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What were you saying?
No, that's great. That's great. One of the other keen areas that I've really locked onto is photobiomodulation therapy. So it's light therapy, and it's a rather than a pharma approach, right? It's non-invasive to reduce inflammation and pain, because that's what I've served up. Who you're going to go see for chronic pain, and if you can use the light therapy to manage the pain, fight inflammation, combat muscle spasms, I think that's a great avenue. So that's really starting to fire up. I do want to just kind of like call out, there was a recent post by Kim Kardashian who informed 360 million of her Instagram followers about a full body MRI scan from Pronovo, and she's calling it a life-saving machine, which drew scorn from physicians who said, wait a second, if you don't have any ailments, what are you doing this for? And she failed to even mention that they're not the only ones. There's Ezra, Nico, and Simon met as well. So if you're following guidance, medical guidance from Kim Kardashian, you're kind of clueless.
Yeah, it's maybe not the world's best physician, but who knows? I want to delve in. So, you know, you introduced me to TytoCare, and I'm like really curious about them. Can you talk about where you see the potential of not just their product, but kind of that more general sort of like, I almost call it like a lab in my home, or a sensor bundle in my home?
No, I really think we haven't talked about home healthcare, right? As people are, with smart toilets and then being able to conduct telehealth and, do sessions. And we haven't even talked about, emotion AI, right? So, which of course ties to chronic pain and mental health, where you can actually, through just the video, you can get a pretty good handle on a lot of the metrics that you need to, rather than having the patient or coming into a clinic, you can actually monitor this. And you've got, of course, ways, smart patches, of course, the Aura Ring and their competitors. Well, of course, Apple Watch is there. I really think that's an up and coming field to really equip people with, biosensors to really be able to get ahead of the curve, before, it's really part of the preventative care and the monitoring without going to, Prenovo and just getting a full body scan, which in many cases is not needed.
How do you think all of that? Well, let me actually rephrase that question almost immediately. Walk that back. What do you think is the best way to sort of integrate that data into, again, going back to the health records? How does that data help inform your doctors in a way that isn't just sort of like cutesy, like, oh, I slept 8 hours yesterday. Like I have a sleep app that records me, probably shouldn't, but it records me and says, oh, you got this amount of REM sleep. Of course it's not true, because I'm not wearing an EEG or any of the other devices that would actually need to do that. But like, how does that type of data inform and go back and support early diagnosis, like real-time diagnosis? How does that go back and become usable to your health, as opposed to just being something that's like a nice to have?
Right. And that's the big gotcha, right? Is sort of like in Fitbit and other. No, you're not going to find a doctor to analyze all that data. So that's where AI, can go through, and similar to like doing, Zoom meetings with, Otter, it will give you the summaries, right? It will give you the topics. It will give you the flags on certain areas. So it's really having a really intelligent digital assistant that is, there to provide for the doctor's guidance, where he or she can spend the amount of time, necessary to be able, to better assess and track the vital signs and treatment plans for the patients.
Yeah, I'd like to delve a little bit more into emotion AI. Maybe take a step back for the people that just joined. Give us your definition, and then take us through like where you think that is currently and where you think that's going.
So first of all, I've been a big fan of emotional AI for a lot of years. And I've advised like 6 or 7 startups. I still have 2 startups in my camp. One of them is called Emoshe, which does emotion synthesis rather than emotion detection. And there's a big difference between the two. But basically, it's part of the play on changing people's, behavior, right? Because people don't change behavior on information, they change it on emotion, which is why emotion AI can be, can really, be factored into the game. Because, so what we may see, our mental representation of the world is infused by emotional experiences. So, so our feelings are a critical determinant of what we experience. And when you're getting into, the mental health angles, right? Like, I'm the big fan of really cracking the gut-brain axis connection, right? So, 6 of 10 diseases begin in your gut, and that's why, back to the vagus nerves, right? How does that affect your mental health? And it's really a collaborative approach to figure this out, because my example with my wife and the spine surgeon, he just basically punted and said, I'm not a neurologist.
Interesting. So actually, Mian just put in something. Doctors from other countries often face language barriers. I want to work on how to overcome this with using AI. And you have informed me about the brain drain that's happening in Africa around doctors presumably leaving the continent to go to other places. How do you think artificial intelligence can effectively distribute care amongst people who maybe don't have access to, say, a world-class facility, or doctors that are, at the top of the pops?
Yeah, there was an article about that I put, right. Africa struggles to stop the brain drain of doctors and nurses because, they're going to, UK, other places, right, where they can get more money. But even in this country, right, we talked about the physician, shortage, but the nursing shortage is just, getting pretty severe as well. And I think that was another from the Biden administration, is to try to pump that back up, and through training programs to address this shortage here. So it's not, it's other, countries, like in Africa, but it's also here. And I really think that besides Tycho Care, Sean, you're seeing startups now where physician assistants and nurse practitioners are setting up, clinics, right? And the quality of care, through an AI digital assistant can be, if it isn't really a real specialty, can really, like dealing with, chronic pain, could be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bob, you requested us pause a little, and I don't think we did because I was so engrossed in what Steve was saying. Did you want to put out a
poll? So we
poll?
have 2 polls that we talked about briefly. So you want to do the hallucinations or the healthcare clinics?
Whatever you want to do. Oh, I know. I wanted to. I finally found the article. So there was a survey of American medical nurses, I guess, and it said, this is really sobering. It isn't just the doctors, but it's nurses. They said nurse career satisfaction has been 80-85% for a decade, and in 2023 it dropped to 71%. Only 15% of nurses employed in the hospital said they will continue in 1 year. 4 or 5 nurses said they experience a great deal or a lot of stress, up 16 points from 2021. And 94% agree there's a severe, moderate shortage of nurses in the area. So the Biden administration, I finally found it, and is investing $100 million in strengthening the nursing workforce. So you've got the GP, you got the nursing, where you can, enable LPNs to RNs, augment the number of primary care nurse practitioners, et cetera. And and some more, the comprehensive training. So these are some of the things that are critical issues here as well.
Yeah. Bob, which poll did you?
Let's go and talk about the hallucinations. I think it's an interesting topic.
Sure. All right, so we have a poll here. Do you agree GPT-4 and other LLMs hallucination is fixable or is not fixable? So take a second to
You guys can clarify what the hallucinations is.
So hallucinations come from the way that an LLM is designed. The goal, it is trained on predicting the next word in a sequence, and it then chooses, okay, what is the highest probability next word in the sequence? And because of that, if it doesn't know the answer necessarily, it will sort of say, well, this is, if it doesn't know to terminate that sort of sequence, it'll say, or it won't say, well, I don't really know. It'll say the next best probability is this, which may not exist. So you're not actually, to your point, or to Steve's point earlier, which is like, it doesn't entirely know the concepts, albeit there is a huge amount of embodied information within all of the language. It's taken in such a corpus of data. There is a certain amount of embodiment there, but it doesn't actually know the concept. So it doesn't know when it doesn't know. Although I would argue that I have heard a lot of humans hallucinate too with what they're saying. So again, it might be an unfair
No, I know
standard.
that's exactly right. But that's that's a great synopsis, Sean. And that's what they have that's what I kind of like led off with. There's no common sense to generate meaning because they don't know if something is true or false, right or wrong, and they lack explainability, which comes right back to evidence-based reasoning. So that's why you're still going to get some faultiness and bias, and that's not good for the clinical risk.
All right, so this is
So we have a dim view on large language models.
Exactly.
25% say yes, 56% say no, and 19% say not sure.
Right.
Steve, what's your opinion?
I really think you've got to, like, the Andrew Nigg, teasing in semantic search, the evidence-based reasoning. You need, symbolic AI, other methods, LLMs alone. I mean, if you're doing content marketing, and, like on, Twitter, which is a cesspool, who cares, right? But when you're getting into, medical field, it's a different game. If you don't have the explainability, it's really scary.
I happen to be, so I think I agree with you, and sort of think that the nature of, say, so we don't know how GPT-4 works. Like, it's called the large language model, but there are other, there's thoughts that it's also a mixture model of several models working in conjunction. And so I actually, when we use large language model, I think we're implicitly saying, whether we know it or not, we're actually saying these are multiple models working together. And I do think it will be fixed. I just think it won't be fixed strictly by a transformer model. So like, I think people are sort of confusing transformer with large language model, whereas sort of like, if you think more broadly, I actually think mixing these models, which is what you're alluding to, I think will fix the problem. So Bob, did you want to throw up the second?
Here's the final so on healthcare.
We got to all four. That's great, Bob.
So is this what is yeah, so these are healthcare clinics is the new thing versus going to the doctor. Is that what this is about?
This is about will Amazon, Walgreens, startups like that are like this bionic become more for primary care than hospitals.
Yeah.
What's the trend? Yeah.
And what Mark Cuban's thinking of is that's separate. That's more a pharmacy thing. Yeah,
that's a pharmacy thing. Yeah.
But I do think that speaks to a larger trend of like a different approach to care. And I think Mian talked about home care as being used here in the Emirates. I think that's just powerful. But I don't think that
Yeah.
there's going to be, I think you're going, actually, let me ask this question before I start to try to answer myself. Looking to the future, where do you think we get to in 5 years? Obviously, 10 years, 20 years, it's very difficult to predict, but paint a picture of the augmented revolution in 5 years.
I think, the first questions that we had there is getting, addressing more than what the consensus is with improving clinical documentation, structuring patient data, optimizing workflows, right? So I think we're going to get more into, the diagnostic and treatment recommendations, right? I think, which is phenomenal. And this gets us closer to really having generative AI, biological AI to, to address triage like the Tel Aviv, getting into telehealth and remote patient monitoring. So that's going to be better home healthcare, like one of the attendees put in the chat window. And hopefully treatment and therapy recommendations for the providers. So I think those are all good things to look forward over the next 2 to 5 years.
You consider, out of curiosity, and before we get to the answer, do you consider DeepMind's work with AlphaFold to be part of, sort of biological AI?
Yeah, I think it does. It kind of falls into that, and I think it's great with the protein folding what they've done there. It's a really great, endeavor. So yes.
I'm still waiting to see what I still feel like DeepMind, and I talk about this at every podcast that I think Bob and I have done together, is that like I feel like DeepMind is a sleeping dragon. They're working on something, and whatever, I just feel like whatever they're going to release is going to be pretty awesome, because I just feel like they've done so many cool things, and the attention of the world has been pulled away because ChatGPT captured everybody's imagination. But man, DeepMind, I just feel like they're up to something. They're up to something.
Right.
So Bob,
so I think how we doing on to, we're ready to wrap up, right?
We're pretty much. So let me just as far as that poll goes, pretty unanimous on the healthcare clinics.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Wow, that is huge. Whoa.
That's interesting.
It is.
Well, I think with that, I would just, Steve, I just want to thank you for your time. It's every time we've talked, I've learned more, and I feel like I've grown. So I'm really grateful to sort of have been able to have this conversation with you. And Bob, thank you for putting everything together, and for our audience, really grateful to have you here. Great questions, great comments.
Great questions, really great interaction. So appreciate it very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, this is wonderful. So if we have enough to have another follow-up podcast, if that makes sense for you guys, because there's a lot of interest out there.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's just intensifying. So
I get to talk to Steve. I'll do anything, whatever it takes.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, audience. Nice speaking.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers.